I'm really excited about this new Galion Victoria headphone amplifier. Semi-affordable, single-ended, low-power tube amp that finally turns one of my long-time passion into a real product, thanks to my collaboration with Doge. Now, I always have a soft spot for this kind of design, and with Victoria, that daydream is now something you can actually listen to. Now, if you're not a headphone person, don't scroll away yet, because this integrated tube amp also has speaker output and dual subwoofer output. So it can be used in actual speaker system, not just a headphone rig. Now, I still call it a headphone amp because that's how the project started. The original design was centered on headphone, and the speaker section came later in development. But even so, I put a lot of effort to make sure the speaker's performance holds its own within the Galion family. Now, the other day, my friend Mr. T10 dropped by. Now, I call him that because he owns a pair of Bryston T10s. So I sat him down in front of a few Galion products, and when I switched to the Victoria and I drove speakers with it, within about 10 seconds, he said, "Wow, this is my favorite for voices." So don't underestimate this amp just because it's the most affordable model in my lineup at $1,395. In the right setup, it can deliver some of the best sound I have to offer. Now, for those who don't know, I founded Galion a few years ago with a simple goal: deliver high-end, hi-fi performance for reasonable price. Promoting these products isn't easy. You might think YouTubers reviewing my gear would go easy on me, but it's the opposite. They're stricter because they have to protect their credibility. They know they'll get heat if they seem biased towards Galion. That's why every product has to be exceptional to earn their endorsement. And so far, my batting average has been pretty good. And this is partially because my audio buddies would stop me from bringing something to market if they believe it does not live up to the Galion brand. Take my flagship Galion mono blocks, for example, the Titans. 200 watt of tube power, two 211 tubes. Everyone who has listened to them said it's the best sounding Galion product they've heard. Now, the problem is that these amps will have to sell for 15 grand to make sense, and all my audio buddies agree that they sound like a $15,000 amp. But to carry the Galion brand, $15,000 amp must be able to compete with $30,000 amps. If not, your product's not ready. This is what my friend told me. So that's why this project, this Galion Titan monoblocks, has been sitting there for a year. See, the Victoria is one of my most exciting projects because it's affordable, $1,395, punching way above its weight against pricier solid-state and tube headphone amps. Now, before we dive deeper, give me a minute to explain why I think Victoria might have a place at your home. See, I think every audiophile should experience certain things on their audio journey: Manapan, horn speakers, open baffle speakers, vinyl, and so forth. Because until you try it, you don't know what you don't know. If you have never listened to a few Class D amps, you will not know whether you like them or not. Now, I say a few because you cannot just listen to one Class D amp and then give up, right? A tube amp is also something I think every audiophile should own at one point in their journey. Not just a tube amp, but a low-power tube amp and a high-power tube amp. See, in the world of tubes, there are a few classics you really need to try. Each has its own distinct sonic character, and part of the fun is discovering which one resonates with your taste. Well, you might end up liking all of them. So for those new to tubes, don't assume tubes all sound alike. KT170, for example, doesn't sound anything like a 300B. If you enjoy a warm romantic presentation with a smooth, rich mid-range, you'll likely gravitate towards 300B. If you prefer something more punchy and dynamic, you'll want a KT170 amp. Today, we're going to talk about the EL84 tube. See, a tube that's particularly well suited for Class A, single-ended amps. These aren't high-power tubes by any means, because their main strength is lifelike mid-range. Now, on the market, most tube amps are either single-ended or push-pull. Victoria is single-ended design that uses EL84. So what is the benefit of single-ended design over push-pull? I asked AI, and it says single-ended amps use one tube or sometimes two in parallel per channel to amplify the full wave. So one tube for the whole waveform, creating even order harmonics distortion that typically euphonic and musical. This contrasts with push-pull, where two tubes handle half of the signal, one for the top wave, one for the bottom wave, and cancels even harmonics, yielding a cleaner but sometimes less alive sound. So the result for single-ender is greater mid-range purity, detail, and a lifelike in-the-room presence, especially for vocals and acoustics. Well, that's what AI said. True or not, I don't know. Post your opinion in the comments. The trade-off for single-ended. Push-pull offers better bass control, power, and lower distortion for demanding loads. Victoria outputs 0.5 volts in watts into headphones and 4 watts to speakers because it's a single-ended Class A design. Now, but you'll be surprised what quality 4 watts can actually do. In my room, when I pair with my 92 dB sensitive Sonata, I can reach about 80 dB listening levels. And I won't want to go louder than that. I measure it with white noise, and I see levels past 90 dB with Victoria and Sonata. So why would I want a low-power tube amp? The obvious answer is it's all about the sound. I've developed quite an obsession for these low-power amps. So I tried many of them, including from well-known brands, and the power ratings, while modest, can be very expensive. I've tried maybe 20 plus low-power amps in my life, and there's something special about low-power, single-ended design. Now, if you're a crazy audiophile like me, yeah, you eventually find yourself wanting multiple amps. One for KT88, one for 300V, one for 211, and so on, right? One for each day of the week. And the reason I'm taking the time to talk about tube is to help set the correct expectation. I don't want you to buy the Victoria because I say it's good, because everything is good these days. I want you to buy it because what I describe about the Victoria matches what you're looking for. See, if you already own a 300B amp and love it, and after watching this video, you wonder whether the Victoria will sound better, you're approaching this the wrong way. You should be looking for a better 300B tube amp if you want something better, not an EL84 bass amp. See, I really don't want to see emails telling me, Tom, I would like to return to Victoria because my KT170 amp has more dynamics. I'm going to fly over to your home and smack you in the head. If your goal is to try a different sound than what you have, then we can talk. So let's take a look at the amp. See, on the front panel, there is a simple switch to toggle between HP, headphone, and SP for speakers. You have a knob to select between different line inputs. There's one headphone jack in the front, and at the back, you find 3 RCA inputs. Now here's the part that really sets it apart from other low-power tube amps. Well, in this price range, it has 2 subwoofer output. So even though the amplifier already produces solid, well-defined bass, having the option to integrate a pair of subs adds a level of flexibility and performance that can take your system to the next level. Now, to change tubes on the Victoria, you need to remove the top corner cover and the top plate. Now, inside you'll notice a mirror that makes it look like there are like 8 tubes, but there are actually only 4, 2 12AX7 and 2 EL84. So while the amp isn't physically large, I actually find it cute, it feels quite hefty for its size and power ratings. That's because it uses big EI transformers. At this price, this is very reasonable given the build quality. You're not just paying for great sound here, you're also getting solid construction and world-class after-sales support. Support doesn't end after your purchase. You know what I mean. Now, these amps are fully CE and FCC certified, which costs an arm and a leg. For me, getting proper certification is non-negotiable because I know there's a major concern for some people when buying amps made in China. Would it catch on fire? So when I first received my prototype, I had my technician cut open the bottom of the chassis so I could start swapping components to improve its performance. So just like my higher end amplifiers that cost 3 times more, this one also uses premium parts. Exotics capacitor, Jupiter, Clarity, Mica, blah, blah, blah. Now, the build quality is higher than what you would expect in this price bracket. Now, each Victoria comes with 2 Moolart 12AX7 and EL84. Now, I decided to import them rather than using the Pivan tubes. Even the Doge and Pivan, they're like 15 minutes drive apart. This, however, would be only for the first 2 batch of Victoria because I like it with Moolart. That's it. I did not care about profits. It costs more with duties and import fees for molars, but I really want people to hear it through my favorite tube, not chase profit. That's why I still drive a 13-year-old Corolla, man. So after the first two batch, I will move to PIVAN tubes, which offer a slightly more detailed modern presentation, which my other audio buddies prefer. No right or wrong, just a question of taste. So if you want it with molar tubes, get them before they sell out, because I'm only going to do it for the first two batch. Now as for the power output, like most tube amps, the Victoria delivers 4 watts per channel in 8 ohms and also 4 ohms. You see, tube amps don't double their power at lower impedance, and that's perfectly normal. So if you have a 6 ohm speaker, try both taps and see which one sounds better. And the easiest way to test is play a bass heavy track. If you hear distortion on the 8 ohm tap, switch to the 4 ohm tap. So, okay, how does the Victoria actually sound? So I decided to ask AI. All right, describe to me the typical sound profile of an EL84 tube. And this is what AI told me. Now, EL84s are generally known for a lively mid-forward honest mid-range, good top-end air, and enough but not massive bass. And it's engaging and energetic overall. Now, that's a close summary of what I'm hearing from the Victoria, with one difference. There is bass with Victoria. See, the Victoria is a lively sounding amplifier. It's not a smooth, romantic, laid-back sounding amp. When I was voicing the Victoria, I was careful with the brightness. Too bright and you get listening fatigue. Too smooth and you lose the essence of EL84. I wanted the Victoria to sound airy and spacious, so I embraced the EL84's lively top end. I tuned it to the point where I think it's a good balance between brightness and air. You see, the brighter a tube amp sounds, the more air it seems to have. But too bright and you get listening fatigue. So there's a delicate balance. Victoria's top end sparkles without sounding edgy. The soundstage carries that tube-like airiness, open, spacious. As I said, I make sure not to roll off the top end. You can really feel the air in the soundstage. If you're expecting a tube amp with a smooth roll-off top end, this isn't it. I say voice intentionally, not design, because Mr. Liu designed the amplifier from Deutsch, and I changed parts in it to give it a certain sound. Now, I could have changed a few components' value to make it smoother. So the tonal balance you hear is deliberately voicing choice. Next, the mid-range has body. Yes, it's linear as EL84 should be, but I gave it enough weight in the lower mids so it would never sound thin. See, the EL84 is naturally lean with no bump in the lower mid-range, and some EL84 amps are so lean that they can sound thin. With the Victoria, I wanted to avoid that completely, but without going too far and make it overly warm, because then it will start sounding like a 300B amp or maybe an EL34 amp. Now, my favorite tube is 300B. I love its rich, full-bodied mid-range. My vintage, Mr. Vintage, my audio buddy, doesn't share that opinion. He finds it too color and not realistic enough. That's why tuning Victoria mid-range was such a tough decision. I could make it smooth and rich, or keep it more linear and bring out texture and realism. I always joke, right? I want to hear the singer's saliva. But what I really mean is that I want to hear the exchange of breath, because that is where I hear emotions behind a vocal performance. And that requires mid-range texture. If the mid-range is too forward, it becomes shouty. Too relaxed and you lose that mid-range detail. So I have to carefully adjust Victoria to strike the balance between texture and forwardness that I think is appropriate for EL84. So in the end, Victoria's mid-range embraces the linear character of EL84 with just a touch of extra body in the lower mids to prevent thinness. Result, realistic, transparent, and detailed mid-range where you can clearly hear every breath of the vocalist. It took me a long time to settle on this voicing because that smooth, romantic option was always tempting. But each time I was about to go in that direction, I had to remind myself, this is an EL84 amp, not a 300B amp. All right, next. So what about the bass? EL84, there are known for massive bass or scale. But this is where Deutsch design really shines. So right in front of this amp, you're going to see design by Mr. Liu from Deutsch. That's my way of honoring the designer. For every product Deutsch designed for me, I always put the designer's name in the front and Deutsch name at the back. My only contribution is tuning the amp to sound a certain way. Those designs tend to be very dynamic. This works perfectly in favor of Victoria because, traditional EL84 amps don't have much bass. I have a friend drop by the other day to listen to the Victoria with my Silverline speakers, and he said, "Damn man, the bass is fast," which is not typical for EL84. Another headphone enthusiast audio buddy of mine said, "Man, he tested 7 or 8 headphones, and he said Victoria has more bass than my $3,000 solid-state headphone amp." So in that sense, the Victoria diverges from typical EL84 tube amps. It has bass. Sure, if you use 4 EL84 tubes instead of 2, you can build decent bass into the design, but getting this kind of bass from just one EL84 tube per channel, now that's pretty rare. So I think part of the reason is this amp uses EI transformers, which makes it surprisingly heavy for its size. At low volume, you still get dynamics. You can still feel the floor rumbling slightly on deep notes at low volume if you use speakers. I think this is one of the benefits of EI transformers. And I specifically asked AI about it because I noticed Doge insists on using EI transformer. And this is how AI summarized in the table for me. EI transformer versus Toroidal transformer. EI transformers have sharper attacks, more lively, bigger, quiet to loud swings, which I call dynamic contrast, and quieter background. Interesting. Do you agree? I don't know. Put it in the comments. So with headphones, you get solid bass with all kinds of headphones. Easy to drive headphones, hard to drive headphones, doesn't matter. Now with speaker, it really depends on the speaker. After all, it is only 4 watts. You do have 2 stereo subwoofer output if you think the bass is not enough. So, summary, in short, sparkly top end, transparent top end, very detailed and airy, mid-range that is linear and neutral, with strong texture emphasis, a slight lift in the upper bass, so it never sounds thin. More than adequate bass with real dynamic contrast and torque. You can listen at low volumes because the dynamics stay consistent. See, unlike some of the amps where you have to crank it up to get to feel the life. The Victoria, lately thanks to those EI transformer, delivers dynamics even at low volume. The amp is on the lively, exciting side. This is important. It's not a smooth, laid-back, slow-sounding vintage tube amp. Finally, there's proper layering in the soundstage, so it never feels flat or 2D. You know what I just described is what you expect from a high-end tube amp, not a $1,400 tube amp. That's why low-power amps are very interesting, because you can get the resolution and mid-range clarity of high-end amps. If you're using headphones, you don't have any bass problem. Now, if you're using speakers with this amp, yes, you will not get the explosiveness of a high-power amp. But you know what? For many of us who listen mostly to vocals, adequate bass is good enough. Now let's talk about headphones, because at its core, this is a headphone amp. You'll get the full tube sound here, and any tube changes will be immediately audible. No op amps. It's a true tube headphone amp. So some tube amps, they use op amps for the headphone section, but not Victoria. There are no op amps. To properly evaluate it, I actually brought it around to my audio buddies who are really into headphones. I also borrowed a few pairs to test, and I found the sound was consistent with what I heard on speakers. Very transparent, with amazing clarity and strong bass. Now, I put some of the headphones we've tested up on screen here, but here's the biggest surprise. As I mentioned, this headphone amp outputs 0.5 watts. You might wonder if it can drive a wide range of headphones or just a few. Now, what shocked my buddy, whom I call Mr. Headphones because he owns like gazillion headphones, was that it drove all his headphones effortlessly. He cannot push the volume past half, and he's someone who listens at 100 dB levels. This was shocking to him because he said, dude, my $3,000 headphone amp, which I won't name, can only properly drive about half of my collection, and the Victoria actually delivers more bass than my solid-state amp. So this amp will pretty much drive any headphone on the market. Now, I didn't test with electrostatics because, those need special amps. So what about speakers? 4 watt doesn't seem like much, but it can be all you need. In my 3.6 meter by 5 meter room With my 92 dB sensitive Silverline Sonata speakers, I can hit over 90 dB at 90% volume from 1 meter away. So if you're listening around 75 dB and speakers with sensitivity of 90 dB and a room about my size, you have no issues. Now I said 90 dB plus sensitivity speakers, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. Because I was able to drive the 87 dB Sibelius speakers to 70-ish dB listening levels, which is the volume I listen at. So don't assume this 4-watt amp can't drive your speaker just because your speaker is rated under 90 dB. As long as you don't listen at concert level, don't have a massive room, don't have super difficult speakers to drive like Manapan, and you listen around the 70-ish dB area, if this works in your setup, man, you'll be rewarded handsomely. You might even end up sidelining those 500-watt power-hungry amps that you have in favor of this tube sound. Alright, so next let's talk about tube rolling, and here's the interesting part. The Victoria responds really well to it. Now some of you might be rolling your eyes and thinking, well, obviously the sound changes with different tubes. But if you try as many tube amps as I have, like, I don't know, gazillions, you might share my experience. Not all tube amps respond dramatically to tube rolling. Sometimes you change tube, does nothing. For Victoria, it does. So if you change, let's say, the 12AX7 in front, from Mullard, the stock Mullard to JJ, you get more spark on the top end, extra air, but you gain more brightness. It's great if you want that extra detail. For cleaner bass, use Galion EL84 at the back. I tried every EL84 and 12AX7 on the planet. I ended up with Mullard because I like the smooth sound relative to the other EL84 I've tried. Some people actually find it too smooth, but for me that's my limit. I don't want it any brighter than this. That said, Mr. Mofi, my audio buddy, prefers it brighter, so he likes it when I put Cryotone EL84 and Ray tubes, Ray Select 12AX7. See, EL84 affects more the low end, 12AX7 affects more the high end, and with that combo, that $500 tubes, Cryotone and Ray, the sound really opens up, man. Mr. Mofa loves it because it's more airy, faster, more detailed, tighter bass. But my other audio buddy, they prefer the stock Mullard because they're more musical, less bright. He said, you know, the Mullard's Victoria sound more like a tube amp. With the Ray and Cryotone combo, this approach solid state performance. So Mr. Headphone, whom I mentioned before, he prefers the Ray tube 12AX7 in front and the Mullard EL84 at the back. I think that is the smoothest combo. But I couldn't include Ray tubes as stock because at the time they couldn't meet my demand. So here's the best part. You only need to change 2 tubes. One pair in the front and 1 pair at the back. They're not crazy expensive. If you want a V-curve, man, go for Tungso EL84 at the back. Keep the Mullards in the front. Tungso top end will sparkle more, the mid-range will recess a bit further back, and there's more bass. Anyway, you get the point. There's so much you can do with tube rolling. So if you order Victoria, order online right away some extra tubes, because 12AX7, they're not expensive, 20-30 bucks, almost the price of a Big Mac Trio. So try changing the 12AX7 first. Later on, you can try different EL84, and you can even try the cheap EL84 because the cheap ones, they're veil sounding, right? And in this lively amp, it's actually a good thing. Okay, enough tube rolling. So let's wrap it up now. I don't know if it is because the Navy, the P75, TSP75 preamp, and the Victoria are all made by Doge. They have very good synergy. If you pair the Navy with the Victoria, man, the singer moves closer, the air has more density, and there's extra smoothness and body in the mid-range. The presentation is more musical with rounded edges. So if you already own the Navy or the TSP75 and always wanted to try a low power tube amp, get the Victoria. The synergy is quite something. So in the future, I hope to bring more low power amps to market so you can have like a whole collection of them, right? Imagine 5 of these. Right, one for EL34, one for 6L6, one for EL84, one for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Anyway, man. All right, I'll see you next time.